All right, deep divers, are you ready to tackle Exodus?
Exodus.
We've got all your highlighted verses.
Yeah.
And you have flagged some really thought-provoking stuff.
Uh-huh.
Moses doubting himself at the burning bush.
Yeah.
The super specific instructions for building the tabernacle.
Right.
And even some laws about, well, let's just say oxen could be dangerous.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Are you ready to help us decode all of this?
Absolutely. Exodus is more than just an ancient text. It really grapples with some big themes like liberation, faith, even the formation of a whole society.
Wow.
There are so many layers here.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what we uncover together.
Okay, so for starters, you highlighted Exodus 3.11 and 6.12.
Okay.
In both of these, Moses is expressing some serious doubts about leading the Israelites out of Egypt.
Right.
He even mentions his uncircumcised lips.
Interesting.
Almost like he's saying he's not a good spokesperson.
Right.
What do you make of Moses' hesitation?
Well, what's fascinating to me is that this isn't just some story about a reluctant hero.
Okay.
It speaks to a very human experience, that feeling of being inadequate when faced with a task that seems way bigger than us.
Right. Because God doesn't say, oh, you're right, never mind.
No, not at all.
Instead, we get this powerful reassurance in Exodus 3.12.
Yeah.
Certainly I will be with thee.
Yes.
And then we have that moment when God reveals his name.
Oh, yes.
As I am.
Yes.
That I am.
Yes.
You know, Exodus 3.14, the one you highlighted.
Yes. Yes, that one's very important.
It's a powerful statement.
That declaration is profound.
Yeah.
It's not just a name. It's a statement of God's eternal nature, his self-sufficiency.
Right.
And it's a message to Moses for sure.
Right.
But I think it also speaks to us, reminding us that even when things are uncertain, there's this constant, unwavering presence.
Okay, so we've got Moses empowered by this encounter with God.
Yeah.
He's going head-to-head with Pharaoh.
Right.
And then we have the plagues.
Uh-huh.
It's never really sat well with me to just think of them as straightforward punishments.
I see.
I feel like there has to be more going on.
Yeah, I think you're onto something.
Okay.
There are scholars who argue that the plagues were carefully chosen to target the Egyptian pantheon of gods.
Really?
Yeah, like showing God's power over their deities.
Wow.
Take the plague of frogs, for example.
Okay.
That mocks Hecate.
Who's Hecate?
Hecate is the Egyptian goddess of fertility,
Okay.
often depicted with a frog's head.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like God is saying, you want to see power, I'll show you what real power is.
Exactly.
But then we see Pharaoh going back and forth,
Yeah.
promising to let the Israelites go,
Uh-huh.
and then immediately changing his mind.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's stuck.
Yeah, it makes you think. It really makes you wonder about free will and
Right.
divine intervention.
Oh, wow.
Exodus 8.8-10 and 9.27-28 are prime examples.
Okay.
Pharaoh seems to be making a choice,
Right.
and then he just backtracks. So does that mean his choices were any less real?
Right.
Or is there something else going on?
That's a question that's puzzled theologians for centuries.
For sure.
And I'm sure a lot of us listening have thought about it in our own lives.
Yeah.
When do we actually have control, and when are things just totally out of our hands?
Right.
And this is where that really important moment, the Passover, comes in, right?
Yes, Passover.
You marked Exodus 12,
Okay.
where it's describing how to prepare and eat the Passover lamb.
Right.
It had to be roasted, eaten with unleavened bread and bitter herbs.
It's all very specific.
Why all the specifics?
Well, the meticulous instructions show how sacred this ritual was.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a meal.
Uh-huh.
It was a symbolic act, a reminder that they were about to be liberated.
Right.
And Exodus 12:11 says it was to be eaten in haste,
Oh, yeah.
which adds this layer of urgency, like they were ready to bolt at any moment.
Wow.
And it's fascinating that this practice that started thousands of years ago
Yeah.
is still observed by Jews today.
Yeah, it speaks to the power of tradition.
Absolutely.
But leaving Egypt is just the beginning.
Right.
They still have to make it through the wilderness.
Yeah.
And that's where the manna comes in.
Right.
And you highlighted the instructions for gathering it in Exodus 16.
Yes.
Especially those about gathering double on the sixth day
Uh-huh.
and resting on the Sabbath.
Yes.
It's interesting that this act of divine provision comes with rules.
It does.
It makes you think about how God was proving them.
Right.
As mentioned in Exodus 16.45.
Yeah.
It's not just physical sustenance.
Right.
It's also about their obedience.
Yes.
And trust in God.
And it raises a really interesting question.
What's that?
Is it enough to just believe in a higher power?
Uh-huh.
Or does real faith require action?
Okay.
A commitment to aligning yourself with what God wants?
So we have divine reassurance,
Yeah.
incredible displays of power with the plagues.
Mm-hmm.
Then this covenant that's marked by Passover,
Right.
and now this test of faith with the manna.
Exactly.
It feels like all of this is building to something even bigger.
I think so, too. There's a momentum here.
Yeah.
A sense of anticipation
Yeah.
for what's going to come next.
What comes next?
Well, what comes next is one of the iconic moments in Exodus.
The giving of the Ten Commandments.
Yes, at Mount Sinai.
Right. You highlighted that whole section in Exodus 20.
Yes, it's a big one.
But before we dive into the actual commandments,
Okay.
let's talk about the setting.
Yeah, the setting is important.
Because it's not exactly a casual hangout spot.
Not at all.
Thunder lightning a big, thick cloud on the mountain.
Right. Exodus 19 really emphasizes how intense it was.
Yeah.
The sheer power of God being there.
Yeah, and then there were all these strict rules about who can even get close to the mountain.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exodus 19.12-13 says that if you touch it, you die.
Right.
Even animals weren't allowed.
It's like God saying, pay attention, this is serious.
It really highlights how sacred this space is
It does.
and the reverence demanded by God.
Yeah, and it's a powerful contrast to what
Yeah.
image of Moses alone on the mountaintop,
Right.
receiving these laws directly from God.
I wonder what it must have been like for Moses,
Yeah,
going from that close conversation at the burning bush
right.
to this massive scene at Sinai.
It's a journey within a journey,
Yeah.
and it shows the transformative power of encountering God.
Okay, so we have this dramatic backdrop, Moses as the go-between, and then the Ten Commandments themselves.
Of course.
These cover so much ground. Honoring parents,
Yeah.
not stealing, murdering, committing adultery.
Yeah.
It's like a plan for a good and fair society.
It is.
And it's amazing that even now, these principles are the basis for a lot of legal systems and ethics.
Their influence is undeniable,
Yeah.
but I think we need to look beyond just seeing them as rules.
Okay.
They're supposed to reflect a deeper moral code,
Uh-huh.
a way of life guided by respect for God,
Yeah.
ourselves, and each
Okay.
other.
So it's not just about following the rules.
No.
It's about understanding why they are there,
Exactly.
what kind of world they were meant to create.
Right.
But there's so much more to talk about here.
There is.
Should we look at some of the specific commandments?
Absolutely.
Talk about why they still matter today?
Yes. Let's see what else we can learn from these ancient words.
Buckle up, deep
This
divers.
can be good.
We're about to get into some serious moral and ethical stuff.
For sure.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, deep divers. Before the break, we were talking about the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
And how they're not just about rules, but about making a just and good society.
Right.
But Exodus doesn't just stop there.
No, it doesn't.
It goes into all these other laws, covering everything from personal injury to property damage.
Yeah.
You even highlighted what happens if an ox gores someone.
Oh, right. The ox goring laws.
Yeah.
Those are in Exodus 21.28-36.
Okay.
And they give us a look into how complicated the law was in ancient Israel.
Wow.
They outline different scenarios and penalties,
Oh, okay.
showing that they do cared about accountability
Yeah.
and making things right for the victim.
It's so interesting how these old laws talk about things that we still deal with today.
I know, right?
We still argue about who's responsible when something goes wrong.
For sure.
Even if our oxen aren't running around goring people these days.
Exactly.
But one of the most talked about laws from Exodus is the idea of an eye for an eye.
Oh, yes.
It's in Exodus 21.24.
Right.
How do we make sense of that?
Well,
It seems so harsh
it does seem harsh.
compared to how we think about justice now.
You have to remember that an eye for an eye
Yeah.
wasn't meant to be taken literally.
Oh, really?
It was actually a pretty revolutionary idea back then.
Okay.
The goal was to limit revenge
Yeah.
by making sure the punishment fit the crime.
Okay.
It was about being fair
Uh-huh.
and making things balanced again,
Yeah.
not about more violence.
So it was actually a step towards a better system,
Yes, exactly.
not away from it.
Right.
It's important to keep in mind when we're looking at these ancient texts.
Yes,
We
definitely.
can't just apply our modern thinking without understanding the context.
Right.
Speaking of those old laws, you also highlighted Exodus 22.25.
Yeah.
That one's about lending money and charging interest.
Right. Those laws prohibited charging too much interest to the poor.
Okay.
It shows they really cared about economic justice.
Yeah.
Those laws were meant to protect people from being taken advantage of,
Right.
especially the most vulnerable people in society.
Like a safety net
Exactly.
to make sure that the way money worked didn't make things harder for those who were already struggling.
It makes you think about our systems
Uh-huh.
and if they really are compassionate and fair.
I noticed you also highlighted a law about taking someone's cloak as collateral for a line.
Yes, Exodus 22.26-27.
Okay.
That one says if you take someone's cloak, you have to give it back by sundown
Okay.
because it's their only covering.
Right.
It's like saying, yes, you can hold on to their cloak,
Yeah.
but don't leave them out in the cold.
That's a really interesting detail.
It is.
It says a lot about their values.
It shows that even with laws and money,
Yeah.
there's still a need to be decent
Right.
and to recognize everyone's dignity.
It also shows how all these laws are connected.
Exactly.
They weren't just random rules,
Right.
but a whole system of principles working together
Right.
to make a society that was just
Yes.
compassionate and in line with God's will.
It reminds us that true justice isn't just about punishing people.
Right.
It's also about taking care of the vulnerable
Yeah.
and making sure everyone has a chance to thrive.
Let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about the construction of the tabernacle.
The tabernacle.
Yeah, the portable sanctuary where God would dwell among his people.
Right.
What stood out to you about that?
Well, the amount of detail they put into building it is amazing.
Yeah.
Exodus 25:31 and 35:40 lay out exactly what materials to use, the dimensions, and even how to decorate it.
Wow.
It shows how important it was to be precise
Yeah.
and obedient to God's commands.
Almost like they were trying to show their devotion in a physical way.
Yes, exactly.
Like honoring God through their craftsmanship.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't just one person doing it, right?
No, it was a group effort.
Exodus 35 talks about how men and women enthusiastically brought materials even more than they needed.
It shows how dedicated they were to the covenant.
Yeah.
All that generosity and skilled work.
Yeah.
It shows how powerful it can be when people believe in something together.
It reminds me that we can achieve great things when we work together for a common goal.
Absolutely.
So we've got this amazingly detailed structure built by a whole community that represents God's presence among the Israelites.
Right.
But it's not just a building, is it?
No, it represents something deeper.
I think you're right. The tabernacle wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was about their commitment to their agreement with God.
Yeah.
And their belief that God was with them.
Right.
It also reminds us that people have always wanted to create sacred spaces.
Yes.
Throughout history and across culture.
From temples to mosques to churches.
Exactly.
We've always tried to connect with the divine.
Yeah.
Through physical structures and gathering together.
It speaks to a universal desire.
Yeah.
To connect with something bigger than ourselves.
To create something real.
Yeah.
That represents something we can't fully understand.
But the journey doesn't stop there.
Right.
The Israelites still have problems, disagreements, and times when they doubt.
And that's where the laws, the rituals, even the stories in Exodus become really important.
They do.
They're like a guide, a map for dealing with the complicated parts of faith, freedom, and creating a society. It's like they're constantly reminded that freedom isn't just about escaping physically. It's about building a life that lines up with their values, their agreement with God, and their vision for a fair and good society.
We've only scratched the surface of what Exodus has to offer.
I know, there's so much more to explore.
So much more.
So many layers to uncover.
What are your thoughts as we wrap this up?
You know what really stands out to me is how Exodus blends the personal and the communal.
Okay.
We see individuals like Moses wrestling with their own doubts and fears. But at the same time, we see the whole group struggling to find freedom in who they are.
It reminds us that faith isn't just a solo thing.
Exactly.
It's something we live out with others in our relationships. And by talking about the challenges and victories we share as humans.
And through those shared experiences, we can find insights and wisdom that can guide us in our own journeys.
Well said. But before we wrap up,
let's
think about how all of this connects to you, our listener.
You highlighted the verses for a reason.
What spoke you?
What questions did it make you think about?
What connections do you see between the Israelites' journey and your own?
Maybe you're drawn to Moses' hesitation at first.
Yeah.
And find comfort in how God reassured him.
Okay.
Or maybe the plagues speak to you and your own experiences of overcoming challenges.
Whatever it is, let this deep dive be a starting point for your own exploration of Exodus.
Right.
And how it still matters today.
We would love to hear what you think.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts, your questions, your aha moments.
Let's keep this conversation going. It feels like we've really walked a mile in those Israelite sandals.
I know, right?
Escaping slavery, wandering in the wilderness, all those back and forth with Pharaoh.
It's quite a journey.
As we wrap as this deep dive, what sticks with you the most?
You know what really strikes me is that the Exodus story isn't just about physically moving from one place to another.
Okay.
It's a story about changing, about people going from being defined by oppression to creating a new identity based on their covenant with God.
That's a powerful idea.
It is.
And it makes you think.
Yeah.
Where's your Egypt?
That's a good question.
What are those things holding you back?
Yeah.
What limitations are you ready to break free from?
Because if the Israelites could escape Pharaoh, Surely we can face our own challenges.
And their journey shows how important faith is.
It does.
Imagine being in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
No food, no clear path.
You'd have to really trust that something bigger was guiding you.
Even when you couldn't see the way forward.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just about blindly believing.
Right.
They had to actively participate, follow the instruction.
Yeah, even when it didn't make sense.
That idea of obedience, of aligning ourselves with something bigger.
I think that still resonates with us today.
It does.
When we face ethical dilemmas.
Right, those moments where we're trying to figure out what's right. What aligns with our values.
It makes you wonder. Yeah. Are we just wandering around lost?
I know.
Or are we actively building a better world?
For ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.
That's the question.
We've talked about the big themes of Exodus.
We have.
But let's not forget those specific stories and laws.
The details are important.
We've got those super specific instructions for building the tabernacle.
Yeah.
The debates about an eye for an eye.
Right.
Those compassionate laws about giving back a cloak before sundown.
It's all connected.
These details aren't just random facts.
They tell us something.
They give us a glimpse into the values.
The beliefs.
The struggles.
Of people trying to figure out how to live.
Yeah, how to be in the right relationship with God.
And with each other.
And those stories invite us to do the same.
They do.
To think about how those ancient ideas apply to our lives today.
Exactly.
To ask ourselves hard questions about justice.
About compassion.
About what it really means to live a life true to our beliefs.
So as we come to the end of this deep dive,
I
have a question for you, our listener.
What's that?
What's the one piece of wisdom?
The one insight.
The one story from Exodus.
That you'll take with you.
Because this isn't just about understanding an old book.
Right.
It's about letting those words speak to us now.
Yeah, to shed light on our journey.
And to inspire us to live with more purpose and meaning.
Beautifully said.
The Exodus story is a gift.
It is.
An invitation to think about our own journeys.
Of liberation.
Definitely.
And of searching for a life that matters.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Exodus.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Your aha moments.
Keep searching.
And keep diving deep.